Hello, everybody. Today I will be covering about three topics: threat of modern weapons, the Afghanistan war, and history terrorism, along with a recent event regarding Afghanistan. All right, starting off with threat of modern weapons. After the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union were left with huge nuclear arsenals. The two countries also made it a top priority to keep nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons out of dangerous hands. During the Cold War, the Soviets and the United States, with 60 plus other countries, had signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT for short. The treaty was put in place to ensure that nuclear weapons did not proliferate and or rapidly spread to nations without nuclear weapons. Since the treaty was made in 1968, it had been renewed once, and this time 189 nations agreed to it. Another thing that was put in place as well was the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA for short. What the IAEA does is monitor the states that are part of the NPT to ensure that they are following the guidelines of the treaty. A quick fun fact is that India, Israel, and Pakistan are the only ones who never joined the treaty. In the 1990s, the United States and the Soviets agreed with each other that they would reduce what is in their nuclear weapon arsenals before the fall of the Soviet Union had taken place. Alright, now let me give you a little insight on the history of terrorism before getting into the Afghan war. Starting off with the definition of terrorism. Terrorism is the calculated use of violence to captivate a general climate of fear in a population, and thereby to bring about a particular political objective. In simpler terms, the use of violence to create fear among a public to help enforce the terrorism's political views. Ancient Greek historian Xphon wrote the effectiveness of psychological warfare. This is a good example as how terrorism is used to overthrow governments and take them over because you can portray and or tell empty threats to cause someone's moral and mental well-being to reduce, causing them to be more willing to follow you and allowing the overthrow to happen. Long before World War I in Europe, 1914 was later to be called the state-sponsored terrorism had already started to manifest itself. For instance, many officials in the Siberian government and military were involved in supporting training and arming the various Balkan groups, which were active prior to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, an act carried out by an activist from one such group, the Young Bosons, and credited with setting in progress the chain of events which led to the war itself. Similar to the IMRO, Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, former groups to terrorism include Palestinian Liberation Organization, Basque, ETA, and the Provisional Irish Republican Army, later to compromise organizations such as the Red Army faction in what was at the time West Germany, along with the Italian brigades. This all led up to the September 11, 2001 attack on America, the fall of the Twin Towers. This attack on America is what starts the Afghanistan war and lasts for years to come after. Once the Taliban government had refused to give up their terrorist leader Osama bin Laden, during the wake of the Al-Qaeda's, the Taliban had struck America's Twin Towers. America's response to this was to invade Afghanistan. In the 1990s, bin Laden mobilized the Al-Qaeda to expel the U.S. interests and military power from Saudi Arabia. During 1998, Al-Qaeda terrorists had bombed American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Then that's when the major blow had happened in America, starting the war officially. The war between the two lasted for a long 13 years. This made the record of being the longest war that the United States had fought in. The war had surpassed the record originally held by the Vietnam War by approximately 5 months. After the bombings of the two American embassies, the president of the time, President Clinton, had sent cruising missiles attacks against bin Laden's training camps in Afghanistan. The missiles ended up missing Saudi and other terrorist leaders. During the war, the U.S. had planned that had consisted of 3 phases. Phase 1 was to topple the Taliban ultra-conservative political and religious factions, which lasted for a brief 2 months. The second phase was the phase that lasted from 2002 to 2008. This was just a strategy stage of figuring out how to take the Taliban government and rebuilding institutes. The third phase was a turn to classic counterinsurgency doctrine. The third phase was made up most of the war. The U.S. would proceed to send in thousands of troops over the next few years to aid in the war and keep fresh people mixed in. One of the big key points during the war was the death of bin Laden in 2011. After that, it was mainly a fight against terrorism, but not so much against bin Laden. By the summer of 2012, President Obama outlines a plan to reduce troops by 32,000. Now that is mainly a fight to push away terrorism and keep it from happening. By 2013, the Afghan security takeover is completed, and they can begin to train people anti-terrorism and continue to push it away. In 2017, the U.S. bombs an Islamic State redoubt with the mother of all bombs and sending in a couple more thousand troops into the area. In 2019, Trump calls a peace talk because negotiator Kazalan announced that an agreement had been reached in principle with Taliban leaders. In a tweet Trump sent out, he said that he called off the meeting with the Taliban, which in turn had caused more deaths in the long run, and this had upset the Taliban. In 2020, the U.S. and the Taliban signed the treaty that leads them down the path of peace. Towards the end of 2020, the U.S. begins to slowly take away troops from Afghanistan, as this is the start down towards the end of the war. The Taliban takeover begins to collapse, and by the end of 2021, this was the announcement that the end of the war, it was the end of the war, and soldiers began being evacuated by the thousands. For current events that relate to all this is Taliban beginning to search people's homes in Afghanistan. It isn't uncommon for this occurrence to happen, except for the fact that it is happening at random and more than 2 Taliban are conducting the search at the homes without permission or search warrants, looking for any weapons or military equipment. After the Americans left, everything had went downhill from there. Healthcare fell, leading to more premature births and mortalities. Afghanistan lives began to become worse. According to one of the Taliban, the purpose of doing this was to catch criminals and arrest them because in recent weeks, to the help of the searches, they had found 2 teens that were kidnapped and arrested the prosecutors. People begin to become worried that the Taliban might one day be able to see their private messages, and that strikes fear in the community. Another event is girls going to school. With the help of the U.S. Taliban agreement, the Taliban would allow girls to go to school, but backtracked on that thought and won't let them go past 6th grade. While the Taliban are known for their radical way of ruling, that has struck panic among the people who live there. I hope you enjoyed. Bye.